All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate you giving us some of your time, and I think you have a unique story and are providing unique service to the area, and I'm excited to share it with the audience.
I appreciate it, Ryan. Thanks very much for the invitation, and I'm excited to share it with your audience too. I think it's a fun site, and a lot of people dig it.
Yeah. So I guess well, let's just hit everybody with what you're doing now, and then I want to get a little bit into like how you got involved with this career. But let people know just so we give us some context. Like what are you doing right now, and kind of why are you doing it?
All right. So when I left Channel 13, I was on the air for a little over 13 years, and my first TV job was in Corpus Christi, Texas, and then I worked at a station in DC before that when I was in school at Maryland. So I've been around the broadcast business for a good 22, 23 years, and as my career has come into this whole social media frenzy that everybody is now in, right? So people, the reason that local television news continues to lose viewership is just because of this. I mean, people are looking at their phones, they're getting what they deem is necessary for their lives. And I get that. And leaving television news gave me an opportunity to see things from a little bit of a different angle. I love to engage with people. I always do. People still stop me in the grocery store. I haven't been on the air for 2.5 years, man. And people are still like, hey, we miss you on TV. And that's great, not from an ego standpoint, but it means to me that I still left a mark with these folks and that they came to me for weather information. And the best thing about talking to people out and about, wherever it might be, if it's at a bar or in a bank or whatever, I know what it is that people want from a forecast. And what they don't want is to be tethered to a newscast where at 5:15, 6:15, they get 3 minutes of weather, most of which has nothing to do with them or their lives. And a lot of times they'll even leave that forecast after that 3 minutes or whatever it is, and they still don't know what the forecast is. And that's not anybody's fault. That's just the way that it is. So my idea in developing this website and putting it together was just to be able to give people what they really wanted in terms of weather, right? If you live in Columbia County, you don't necessarily care what's going on Lake George or even in the Catskills. You want to know, hey, my son or my daughter or my niece is having a birthday party on Saturday afternoon at 2:00, and I've heard that there might be scattered showers. So I need to know, is it going to rain? Can I have this party outside or inside? Or I'm going to a show at SPAC that starts at 7:30. What's it going to be like at SPAC at 7:30? So that's the whole concept behind this, is just to be able to give people the weather that they actually need and the weather that they want. And it's a pretty simple concept. And I think the most important thing is just to have an open line of communication. It started with my talking to people out in the community for years and years and years. But then I also encourage people to email me and say, hey, we're going over to the Cape for a week. What's the weather look like over there? How's the drive going to be? It's just about engaging with people. And I love it. So it scratches that itch for me just because I'm a social person, but I also know that I'm giving people information that they need for themselves and their families.
Yeah, and for those listening or watching, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the site as we go, but the website is jasonsweather.com. And if you go to jasonsweather.com, you'll see everything that Jason's talking about. And what the feature of it that I find the most interesting, as a user, I'm a subscriber to the email list, which I highly encourage everyone listening or watching to do, because one, it's free, and two, at 5:00 or whatever it is every day, whatever the time is exactly, before the day gets started, let's put it that way, I get an email, and it takes me 30 seconds to scroll through it, but I get all the information I need. Is it going to rain? Is it not going to rain? What's the temperature? And then what I like is on the days where I actually want to dig in and get more, that's there. But it gives you both functions. I can just, hey, I don't really care what the weather is, but I'm interested. I'm going to scan real quick. Or, hey, I have something going on today. I really want to know, in the afternoon, am I going to be able to take my kids on a 3-mile hike, or are we going to get drenched?
Right.
And I have found that to be, I just, there's no other service, even like weather.com, which is like it's almost like they're trying to get you to not come and check it out. It's like, you can't get that so quickly. And I've, that was what drew me in, and why I became so interested in the project, was because I was like, I don't see anybody else in the space delivering this kind of service.
Cool, man. I appreciate that very much. That's very kind, and that's exactly what it is that I'm trying to do, because people are busy even in these times that are unprecedented. They've got a lot going on. They have kids that are having to get on Zoom meetings for school. They're doing this, doing that. They have their own work to do. So that's the whole purpose. The email is quick. It's just, I even provide ideas about what to wear for the day, and that was born from my niece had a track meet last year in Bethlehem, and we had a front that came through, and I knew it was going to be cool. And even I was a little underdressed. I was better dressed than most people there, but man, it was cold. I mean, like hats and gloves cold. And there were a lot of people that were just like shivering because, it was late April and it happens. And so then not only do folks get an email, just as you said, just a succinct, here's what's going on today and tonight, it'll give you a suggestion as to what to wear. So again, it's about relating the forecast to people's lives, and it's a really smooth integration and transition into it.
Why do you think that this hasn't been done before? Like, I guess as someone who's lived, I mean, my expertise has always been digital marketing and communication. So like, I see what you're doing and I'm like, this makes complete sense. Like, I love this idea. Like, it's taking something that is important to people's lives and putting it where they are, right? Which is either on their phone or in a quick email that they're looking at. And and obviously you have the site too, but why do you think this hasn't been done before?
Well, I think that we've had the internet around for the last 25 years, basically, when you started to really get a lot of people on it from the mid 90s on. So, and it continues to evolve. And then you have social media, which is sort of a whole different deal, right? You get snippets of things on Twitter, or a link to something on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. So I just think that it just continues to evolve. But sort of a little bit of an aside from that is that traditional media, which is to say newspapers and television stations, they were, and especially newspapers, they were really slow to jump on the digital side of things. And they were trying to figure out, do we charge people? How much content do we put on here? And the fascinating thing for me was I got to sit in meetings and watch this happen and watch, and it wasn't just Channel 13, it was everybody trying to figure out, how do we best market this? Do we want to put a lot of stuff on our website? Then maybe that would discourage people from watching the newscast, which we don't want, those kinds of things. And so it's just an evolution, really. And they are, the traditional forms of media are still, they're trying to get ahead of things, or at least catch up to the way that things are going, but there's just still not quite there yet. And so by me being out of that element, if you will, it just allowed my mind to free up a little bit and go, well, what is it that people want from a forecast, and how can I easily get it to them? What is the best way to deliver this forecast to them? And the emails are great because they just come to whatever, your Gmail app or your Outlook app or whatever you have, and it's just an email and you just read it. So it just seemed to me like 1 + 1 = 3. I mean, it was a pretty easy thing to come up with. And I've, it's evolved over the last 6 months or so, but everybody that jumps on it, they really like it for that reason. It's convenient and it's relevant.
The funny thing for me, I shouldn't say funny, interesting thing is listening to you describe this transition and how, kind of the institutions of an industry are struggling to make these decisions, and they're weighing kind of their gold standard monetization methods versus where attention is going. And it's fascinating because this same conversation is happening in every industry. Like, so I'm in the insurance industry, and one of the reasons that I started Rogue Risk, my insurance agency, is because I'm looking at the way institutions, these long-standing agencies and carriers have operated, I'm saying, wait a minute, you're not really taking this product and bringing it to where people are or where they're going, right? Like that Wayne Gretzky thing, like be where the puck's going to be, not where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so that was a big reason. And now I'm hearing you, and it's just funny, like, different nuances, but the parallels to, this, stepping outside of the mainstream to provide a service where people want to be. It's just fascinating to me. And actually it's been a theme for quite a few of the guests that we've had here. It feels like, in particularly, COVID has taken something that's been slowly building and just snapped it forward, and everyone's struggling with the same questions at the same time.
Yeah, and and you're going to hit some doubles and singles and the occasional home run, hopefully with this, and you're going to strike out sometimes too. It doesn't hurt to try to do these things, but I've always been into science, and in chemistry, when you're trying to get into these more complex chemical equations, what you want to do is start down at what they call the empirical level. That's just the very base level of the equation, and then you can kind of move on from there and and develop formulas and things. So for me, looking at weather, or for you looking at insurance, our empirical levels are what matters to people. We'll figure out how to deliver it to them, and all the methods and all of that, and messaging and whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, in the weather business, people want to know, hey, I'm going to the track today, is it going to rain or not? In the insurance business, it's, how much coverage should I have depending on what it is that I'm doing or trying to insure, and to make sure that I'm covered if something goes wrong. And once you figure that out, then you just kind of, you can expand out from there. And to your point, that's the case in any business, but break it down to its most basic level. And I think that for me, leaving the television business, it allowed me to do that, because then instead of being immersed in it, I'm looking at it from the outside, but I still have the inside knowledge, not only of the way that a television station operates, but what people want. And that's the connection that everybody wants. The TV station wants to connect with the viewer, and the viewer wants to connect with the TV station. Everybody's happy. So in this case, I'm just applying that to my site and my forecasts.
Yeah, you said something in there that I think it's really the crux of a move like you've made, like what I'm trying to do, like others, like my co-host Mike Field, and what he's trying to do in real estate is by stepping out of kind of, I don't know the best way to say this, like what is commonly expected based on the way the world used to be. When you can step out of that, it gives you the ability, and this is what you said, it gives you the ability to strike out, right? Like when you're on TV and you got, weather on the whatever it is, and hey, you have, 90 seconds to deliver, you can't strike out, right? Like you have to play it. I'm assuming, I don't mean to put words in your mouth. I'm assuming you have to play it a certain amount of safe or a certain amount dialed down, only because you have a very limited amount of time, and you're speaking to a very broad audience, and you have to get there. But like with something like this going on your own, you could do 15-second location-based, live weather forecast for each municipality on Instagram every day, right? I mean, I'm just making an idea up. And you're just like, Latham, bam, here you go. And you could figure out after a week, everybody hates that idea. No one likes it. And it's no big deal. Like you just move on to the next thing, where that type of endeavor in your previous life, that would be a huge amount of money outset to make it happen. And if it missed, it would be a huge loss. And that's why I think a lot of those chances aren't taken.
You're right. And even a step further, one of the things that television consultants always kind of pound into, especially the newscast producers' heads, is that they don't want to get into a format, right, where you're doing the same thing every day, because then people tend to get bored. They tend to glaze over. Like, oh, well, we basically saw this yesterday and the day before. Why am I still watching? So you're exactly right. But they also don't have the luxury of going too far out on a limb, because that might fail, and that would be a waste of time and resources or whatever. Whereas this, I mean, to your point, I had in the afternoons, I was doing a happy hour forecast. I figured people are home as an afternoon forecast, to kind of catch people up on what's going on. And it basically fell with a thud. Like people didn't, I didn't get a lot of views. People didn't really seem to care about it, but they hammer the mornings
Yeah.
in terms of the forecast. That is the key time. So you're exactly right. And that's a good example of it. So I just quit doing it. Like, I'm not going to do this for 30 people, you
Yeah.
know. I want to be able to do it when if it's going to really resonate. And my pals at the Times Union, who I've partnered up with to help them out with their forecasts, they have told me that too, that people tend to jump on their site and look at things more in the morning as opposed to the afternoon, obviously, unless something is, major going on.
Yeah.
And so as we get into severe weather season, that's a different story, because I might be on quite a bit and saying, hey, we've got a line of thunderstorms here, or large hail or whatever. But just in an average day, that's it, man. You're right.
Yeah.
Just that's the way it goes. You just
You
move
and I
on.
talked about this a little bit when we were talking about your site, and you know, I was just in full disclosure to the podcast listeners, I've been talking to Jason just because I'm interested in his project. So, I've just been talking to him a little bit, and obviously I'm a geek for digital marketing, but I could see someday like people subscribing via text message. And then if you just had like their zip code and their phone number, like you could be like so targeted because this area so well. Like, hey, a thunderstorm's about to hit in 30 minutes. Like, go grab the umbrellas and bring them in or something. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And the other thing that I think is so interesting about, again, and this, I've been enamored with the project since the first time we emailed about it. But just the other thing I think is really interesting is what you just said. What I heard as a digital marketer was, you are going to know probably bet as well, if not better than anybody in the country eventually. Here are the prime times. Here's what people want when, right? Because you just said, like, I tried 4 p.m. didn't work, or whatever time, 5 p.m. whatever it was. I tried that didn't work. But maybe you find out over a series of iterations, months, years, whatever, that right after lunch, maybe that's a peak. Maybe that's a little secondary spike or something. Who knows? I mean, I'm literally just making that up. But I do think that type of the ability to test and fail is so incredibly important to our businesses today. I think COVID has proven that. I think that just in general, the fact that the world is changing so rapidly, even before COVID, take COVID out of it, the world was changing incredibly rapidly. And
Yes.
you have, you have a generation in terms of the baby boomers that are starting to cycle out. Gen Xers are starting to cycle into those leadership positions. Millennials are starting to jump into those leadership positions and decision-making positions. And again, not right or wrong, just different. And the ability to test and fail and try something else, I think is just so incredibly important to our business. Okay, dude, I'm going to go start his thing. I'm going to cut it right there. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Sorry.
All right, cool, man.
Dudes, off the iPads. Yeah, it's time for your school thing, and you can have them back. You can have them back after your school thing. Okay, come on. You're coming to do both of you do school things, and then you can have them back after because I got one more call. Yep. I need you to move though. It's time. We need you to move. You're gonna miss this more. Sorry about that, dude.
No, it's all right.
Okay, so I did have I love this conversation, but I would love to just I've always just wondered, like, what you said you were into chemistry and science, like what got you into this? Like, how do you get into this field? Like, what drew you into it?
Uh, I've always been interested in weather, and most meteorologists that you talk to, they'll have a story of some kind. Either a tornado came through their neighborhood, or they went through a hurricane when they were 6, or whatever the case may be. And so my thing was, when I was a little kid, like kindergarten, first grade, I didn't want any part of the thunderstorms. They scared me. During the day, I could deal with them. At night, not a fan. Lightning lights up your room and it's thundering, and I just did not like that one bit. So my father took me down to the Albany Public Library, the main branch down on Washington Avenue, and we learned about thunderstorms under the premise of the more you understand something, the less afraid of it you're going to be. It just, fear becomes a respect thing. And I was hooked, man. I started reading other, books and things on weather, and then started to try to, I didn't really have a method other than hope for like snow days, because on snow days, we were off school and I could go out and make money shoveling sidewalks and driveways. And then it just really kind of evolved from there. But I've always been interested in science. And I went to Auburn actually as a chemistry major. And then when my father passed away, I hung out down there for about a year and was just kind of lost. And I ended up transferring to the University of Maryland, and because Auburn didn't have a meteorology program, so I transferred to Maryland and finished out my degree there, and got that, and took some grad classes. But the most important thing was I hooked up with a great group of folks at the ABC affiliate in Washington, and I interned with them over a summer, and then they created a position for me to stay in the fall, because I was working in a restaurant in DC and going to school, and this was an unpaid internship, so something had to give. So they created a position for me, and kind of the rest is history. I started to work on back then what they would call a reel or a tape, and it's really no different from auditioning for a play or a movie. You put yourself on camera in front of the green screen, you go through a presentation, and then you send that out. I literally had boxes of VHS tapes with labels ready to send out to TV stations all over the country. Actually, I take that back. The only stations that I would apply to west of the Mississippi were stations that had weather. Like, I couldn't go to California, beautiful state, but the weather there is just boring. It either rains or it doesn't, or it snows or it doesn't. So you just send stuff out, and it's so subjective. You could have 2 news directors who are basically the bosses of the newsroom sitting side by side, watching my tape, and one news director could go, "Hey, this guy's pretty good," and the other news director, she might be like, "This guy needs to go do something else. He sucks."
Yeah.
And they're watching the same thing. So, eventually a station will take a chance on you. You start off in a lower television market, right? The way TV markets go, there are 210 in the country, with New York City being number 1, LA number 2, and so on down the line. So the smaller stations is where you start, and then you generally, people tend to move to larger markets. And so I started in Corpus Christi, which was market 129, and was there for about 3.5 years. And then a position came open here at WNYT. And at the time, it was what was known as a third job market, but I had only had, this would have only been my second job. But I, being from the area, and the news director liked my presentation, they hired me. And now it's a whole different ballgame. Now stations are hiring kids right out of school, literally, because it's just cheaper labor. That's just the way it is. So I kind of jumped onto the last wave of the golden age of local television news. And then, once social media and some of these other things hit, that's when their troubles really got going.
Do you think you'll see more people in your position, like going out on their own? Do you think this is a trend? Do you think
Well, people in TV, I've seen a lot of people leave and come back because they really missed it. They liked it. I still keep up with most everybody at 13. And, Dan Bazell, who's now on Spectrum,
Yep.
He left and worked for now Senator Tedesco, and then he came back to 13, and then he went to Spectrum. Mark Mulholland left, and he came back. And then other people, a lot of times they'll leave and they'll take another job in a different field. Maybe a communications related type of field, because communications firms and things are always looking for folks that can communicate effectively. And certainly meteorologists are good at that, because, we're taking complex information and data and simmering it down and boiling it down to a level that everybody understands and, more importantly, cares about. So that, there's a skill involved in that. But, some people leave the TV business on their own. Most people don't. I was one of the fortunate few. I left on my own. So, you've heard people say, well, it's those dreaded words, we've decided to go in another direction, and they don't renew your contract. And so, with the uncertainty now in television news, contracts, from what I understand, are completely different, just because there's so much uncertainty. And so these media companies, they don't want to lock people into longer term contracts because they're unsure of what their future is going to look like. And TV business is a business just like any other. They're in it to make money. So, back in the day when they were printing money, now they're not, and they're trying to figure out how to maintain that as much as they can. So it'll be interesting to see. I think you'll see more consolidation of television stations going forward, just because there'll be, fewer mouths to feed in terms of television revenue advertising, because things continue to go over to the digital side.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised too if you didn't see some of these, more traditional organizations, which just for everyone listening, this is not a knock on the model. We're just comparing, contrasting different formats. Yeah. I would be surprised if you didn't start to see some of the more traditional formats, taking using some of the things that someone like you is doing and starting to implement some of that. I mean that it would only make, as an independent becomes more successful, the institutions start to adopt and adjust as necessary. So it's that'll be interesting as well.
I totally agree.
I'm sorry, dude.
I think you'll see that going forward.
I know, but you just go play for a couple minutes, bud. Oh my God. Because I told them I'm on the phone, now they're like losing their mind. Now, it's like when I was just down here doing some work, I didn't hear anything from them. But as soon as I said, "Hey guys, I got a call," now it's dada, and everyone's going crazy. Sorry, I'll splice that in again. So yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see if some of these more institutional organizations don't start to adopt some of the things that they see working for independents like yourself.
Yeah, and the key, I think, in a lot of this, especially with weather, is personalization. As I was saying before, like, people want to know what the weather is. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do, you have to deal with weather.
Yeah.
Right. In every aspect of our lives, we have to deal with weather. be it travel or having a party or whatever the case is. So I think what you're going to see is more of a trend toward a personalization of weather forecasts. And they started that by, putting out, forecasts on websites, whenever that started back 15 years ago,
Yeah.
whatever it is, and on apps and things, but it's still not personal enough or personalized enough for people. So we're still kind of stuck. And, and you made a really good point before. This isn't a knock on the news business, local TV news or whatever. It's just the model has changed and it continues to change. And just like any other business, you either adapt or you die. Look at Blockbuster. You know what I mean? Or look at a company like Kodak. They had the technology for digital photography and they decided, we're good. And turns out they weren't.
Yeah.
Same with Blockbuster. So, it just evolves. Hey, buddy.
Look at me.
Here, we gotta, just for everyone listening at home, because my kids know that I'm interviewing Jason, they've decided to go crazy. So we have a visitor. I completely agree with the notion that, it is, we are being hard pressed against an adapt or die situation. Like I see it in my own industry and insurance. I see it, you just see it across the board. And it just has been, it's almost like this, you had your prognosticators for a long time have been saying, you got to change, you got to change, you got to change, you got to start to think about these things. And a lot of organizations have pushed them off. And COVID has just been just this stamp of, if you hadn't been listening, you are now scrambling. And, and I hope there are so many reasons why this crisis has been awful. I think if we can try to find some silver linings, one of those might be that, organizations adjust to be more flexible in terms of working with people, their needs, their personal lives, like the fact that we're able to do a podcast while my son turns around and stares at me and I try to maintain my concentration throughout that moment. So I think that, I just think it's so interesting. So here's, so we're kind of getting to the end here. And what I'm really interested in is I think you've built this, I think you have a tremendous product. I think, I love the way you're going with it. I think it adds enormous value to our community. And like I said, I highly encourage everyone who's listening to sign up. What is the next, like, what's the next thing you're going to roll out? Like, where do you see this going, like, moving forward? Like, what are some of the more iterations? Like, obviously you want to continue to build the audience, continue to refine, but is there any like little side project you're working on that you think that you're going to add coming up soon?
Well, the site itself, I have, when you check it out, there is a lot of content on there, most of which I wrote. And so because you can tie weather into so many different things. And another thing that I'm really into that I enjoy doing a lot is cooking. So during this COVID stay-at-home time, I've done some cooking videos, and I like to teach people anyway. And so my whole thing around that is that, hey, cooking is not difficult. You lay out your ingredients and your stuff and you just do it. But the weather tie to that is that, what we eat depends on the weather that we have, right? Like, you don't generally make a pot roast in August, right? Yeah. You're out on the grill, you're eating fresh produce from the local farmer's market and all of that. So I want to be able to integrate that more into people's everyday lives to help out. But I just want to continue to have, more content on the site that people can just use this in essence for a one-stop shop. If you want to know, what the phase of the moon is going to be, if you want to know what time the sun sets tomorrow, if you want to know some things about global warming and climate change, I have a huge page on that where I've got kind of teamed up with a group called Climate Central. And then, that's more of the qualitative side of weather and all of the things that go along with all that. And then from the quantitative side, the actual nuts and bolts of the forecast, I want to be able to continue to provide forecasts that are relevant to people in their lives for what it is that they need and when they need it. So I'm just going to, throughout the whole period, just adding different things. So now I have a golf forecast on there, and I went through, and when that first started, it was real. I'll tell you a quick little side note. So I'm going through all of the golf courses in the area. I'm trying to make sure that I've got them all. It's about 60, not including private clubs, but semi-private and public courses, because some were open and some weren't. And I started getting conflicting messages from people that I was calling to say, hey, are you open? And little did I know that while I was doing that, the state said, we're shutting down all the golf courses. So some people hadn't gotten that information yet, and other people had. So I'm like, what the hell is this person talking about? I just talked to a woman an hour ago, and she was like, yeah, we're open, we're doing this. So bottom line is I ended up, and now, of course, the restrictions have been relaxed so that people can get out, but some courses are still closed. So I have that whole list. I think there's 59 courses on there that stretch across our area, from the Mohawk Valley into Western New England. So, people can go on there and say, okay, I got a tee time at 7:24. What's the forecast going to be? I have a forecast. So I'll break it down a little bit, say like morning or afternoon, or maybe even some more tighter iterations than that, just to give people an idea what the tee time is going to be. Hey, tomorrow, your best bet is to have a morning tee time because we're going to have storms in the afternoon, that kind of a thing, because then people get what they need and they move on with their lives. So however I can continue to build that base is what I'm going to do. And, my challenge right now is just to let more people know about it, because more people that know about it, the more people that are going to engage in it, because the response that I've gotten from the people that are on it has been very positive all the way around.
So I think the moral of the story is go to jasonsweather.com, add that website to your bookmarks. That way, whenever you're having a what's the weather going to be moment, you can just click on it real quick, check it out, subscribe to the newsletter. Man, I just wish you nothing but success. I think I know what you're doing for all the right reasons. I know you love it. It comes through in the way you create. And I'm glad that you've taken on this, because like we've said a bunch of times, building an audience is not easy. Getting to that level of participation in a project like this is tough, but I have confidence that you'll get there. So where's the best place for people besides the website? Like if they're social media people, like which one of the channels, can they get at you at? Let people know where they can connect with you.
So I have, every morning when I put out my forecast email, will post a link on my Facebook page, which is just Gough Jason. And then on Twitter as well, which is Jason_weather. And I'm now starting to really get into Instagram too, which is Jason's Weather. So that's the way that people can engage. And especially on my Facebook page, I'll have, quite a few people will access the forecast that way. And then I've also partnered up with the Times Union. So they put out my forecasts and provide links as well. So you can also see those on timesunion.com and on their app. So, kind of really hitting, with their broad audience, just trying to hit, as many people as I can that way, but also through my social media channels, which that's been kind of neat too, because I have my social media channels continue to grow. As I said, even though I've been off the air for, almost 2.5 years, I have more followers now than I ever have. So, it's starting to resonate a little bit, and just want to continue to get the word out and make it as accessible as possible through any of those means.
Well, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on the show. And everyone who's listening, make sure you go to jasonsweather.com, subscribe up for that email.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. I appreciate it, man. Best of luck.
You too. Bye-bye.